Welcome to Just Capital. Just Capital is a nonprofit organization that surveyed over 70,000 people. They wanted to find out what Americans felt about the behavior of big corporations. What did people think were the most important things for a company to focus on in order to be considered morally responsible? Just Capital ended up with a list of the 8 most important things. Here they are in order of importance. Number 1 was how the company treated its workers. Next, how they treated their customers. Then product quality, environmental impact, community engagement, job creation, management leadership, and at the bottom of the list, shareholder treatment. Just Capital took that information and cross-indexed it against the 1,000 largest publicly traded companies in the United States. It was a multi-million-dollar research project, but the net result was a list of America's most just companies. The list was published in cooperation with Forbes magazine. Paul Tudor Jones was the co-founder of Just Capital.
When you think about it, we have an elective process where we go choose our elected officials to govern for us. Well, the government is a $4 trillion piece of a $16 trillion economy. The real, I guess, power is in the private sector, and yet the public has very little impact. When I say little impact, certainly their consumer behavior is very important. That determines which companies survive and which ones don't. And no question their investing is in where they work, but I don't know if they have a collective voice. And I think what we've done is provide an opportunity to aggregate the entire public and give them a voice and give information to companies about how they can become more just. And I think the reason why Just Capital is so important right now, if you think about how we got to where we are now as a society, and I would characterize where we are as in a highly unstable place. We have the highest wealth disparity in over 130 years. How did we get there? Well, one way we got there was back in 1970, Milton Friedman famously said that the social responsibility of a company is to make a profit. And at that point in time, when he said that, taxes were about 70%, just down from 90. Income inequality was probably 1/5 of what it is today and the lowest point in the century. So when he said what he did, I can actually somewhat sympathize with it. Fast forward to today, where profit margins have gone from 6.5% to 11.5%, and where labor share of corporate revenue has dropped 30 or 40%, and income inequality is 5 times what it was then. So this is really important because if we're going to actually change the way that society addresses particularly income issues, we're going to do it through the private sector. That is what drives everything. It's 3 times the size of the public sector.
I assume at some point there's going to be an app, and I'm going to go to it and I'm going to put in sneakers, and it's going to say, these are the just sneaker manufacturers.
No doubt you'll be able to go put in the name of any company and find out immediately probably where it ranks against companies in its own sector, as well as companies vertically throughout the business chain. Our job is to be nothing but great journalists in gathering information and then delivering that information to the public in a completely unbiased way.
I also stopped in to talk to Arianna Huffington about the power of the purse. Arianna is an author, syndicated columnist, and businesswoman. She was the co-founder and editor-in-chief of the Huffington Post and is currently the CEO of Thrive Global.
The general public has never had more power. And that's why Just Capital is so important, because it does the research to inform the general public about the decisions that companies are making around how they take care of employees, and the provenance of products, the supply chain, how they take care of all the different stakeholders not just the shareholders, but the consumers, the employees, the planet, the community, and bringing all that together requires a lot of research, and making that research available means that consumers can make much better, more informed decisions. So I studied economics at Cambridge 3,000 years ago, and I still remember reading the book that Adam Smith wrote before his famous Wealth of Nations, and that was The Theory of Moral Sentiments. And it was really about the need for capitalism to have a moral foundation. When we forget that, we really lose the trust in capitalist institutions. And that's what has happened now, especially at a time when the accelerated rate of technology has had very unequally distributed benefits and has affected the middle class in a way that we are all very conscious of. I mean, we all talk a lot about the growing inequalities, the need for inclusive capitalism, but there is a real gulf between our understanding and the decisions we're making.
I totally agree with Ariana, and I'm trying to make better decisions. When we're planning a trip, I often use information from Bloomberg's free website. It was very helpful in updating our materials for programs we shot about the Chilean Patagonia and Scotland. So I set up an interview with Curtis Ravenel, the global head of sustainable business and finance at Bloomberg, so we could talk about just companies.
We really can influence change through the capital markets by depriving companies, rewarding companies that are really contributing back to society and are creating a more just economic cycle. And we can deprive capital from those firms that aren't. And when firms are deprived of capital, they tend to change the ways that they operate. You have asset owners, which are in fact individuals who make up a large portion of the institutional money is from pension funds, from the teachers of California to the firemen of New York City. The pension funds are looking out for 30-year obligations for a school teacher today that will retire in 30 years and saying, I'm looking at a world that's got volatility around climate change, around social issues, and I want to invest in companies for the longer run. In order for me to do that, I need to understand how well these firms are managing these issues, these mega issues around climate change, around social mobility, around wage stagnation, because they think in the long run, and studies again have indicated that these firms will outperform and that they're building a more sustainable economic activity, which is more just in a lot of ways. There's a high correlation between what is just and what is sustainable. And what's really interesting to me is this combination of financial and social, where you create a social movement of informed individual investors who are pressing for change into a very large and what seems very impenetrable financial institution world. But it really is the idea that you have this ground up swell from beneficiaries of these pension funds that are driving really fundamental change within the institutional investment management world, which in the end will arguably be more successful than policymaking in getting companies to change, because they listen to their large investors, and when they speak with a common voice, that's really what makes change.
Now you might think a company interested in being honest, responsible, and treating its employees and customers with respect would not be as profitable or have as high a stock market value as a company that was just interested in profits. But that's not the case. In fact, it is just the opposite. A just company can outperform a company that is just interested in profit. It's quite clear that a company can do well by doing good, not only in terms of profit and return to its shareholders, but also for its employees, the community, and the environment. For a number of years, the Ford Foundation has been working on this issue. Graham McMillan heads a team at the foundation that helps decide where they should put money in order to encourage a more just approach to business. to prove that a company can do well by doing good.
There's nothing wrong with economic growth. There's nothing wrong with making money. That's something that we believe in. The trick is, how do we ensure that it's equitable, balanced, and fair? That's what we're trying to support, is that shift that goes back towards believing in the long view. There's a change in the tone that's occurring, not just in the United States, but really around the world, that recognizes the way that business is being done right now is not sustainable. It's not balanced, and it's not fair to all of the people that need business to be successful. And the challenge is, how do we harness those very powerful nascent forces and align them to this objective? And more important thing though, Bert, is that there's more and more evidence, verifiable data that shows, again, if you are the CEO of a company that behaves in a good way, in a just way, your company will outperform financially. Think about the word sustainable. I think one of the challenges that has emerged is that there's this belief that it's about being green or soft or something. Sustainable, that's not what the word actually means. It means something that's balanced, something that's predictable. There's a reduction of volatility. I think that's a pretty powerful force. Wouldn't we all want to embrace more sustainability in our lives? And if I'm an investor, wouldn't I want a more sustainable company?
I also talked to Tony West. Tony served as the Associate Attorney General of the United States, the third highest ranking official in the U.S. Department of Justice. He was also the Executive Vice President of Public Policy and Government Affairs at PepsiCo. Tony emphasized that a company must start with an ethical culture in order to have long-term sustainability.
I think one of the keys to creating an ethical culture is having a values-based culture. So, you can have a rules-based culture where, people are following rules, or you can have a values-based culture which really speaks to your character, your integrity as an individual and as an organization. And I think it's really important to build institutions and organizations that have a values-based culture that speak to the actual integrity, to the actual character of that institution. Corporations are interesting things, right? Corporations don't operate as a matter of right in communities, and they get a lot from communities. They get access to resources, they get access to talent. Corporations get sometimes incentives. But what is so important is that they have to earn that by adding value to the social ecosystem in which they operate. So earning that social license to operate is critical to our long-term success as a company.
When Tony was at PepsiCo, he helped set up a project called Ready to Return. It's an excellent example of what a just company does.
It's really support for caregivers. So many of us are in that period of our lives, right, where we're taking care of young kids as well as aging parents. And sometimes that takes us out of the workforce. And what this program is designed to do is for folks who are coming back into the workforce after 2 years or so being absent, we give them a 10-week paid program, so they're paid during this period, in which we help mentor them and coach them and help them sort of regain and strengthen those skills that they had and learn some new skills so that they can re-enter our company with a little bit more ease.
My next visit was with Allison Omens, the Managing Director of Programs and Strategic Engagement at Just Capital. I was very surprised when I read the list from last year about what people were most important in, because I came to it thinking, it must be about sustainability, taking care of the people who are picking the coffee beans.
Yeah.
But in fact, it's much more down to earth. It's how are you treating your employees?
Yeah.
What are you doing to the community that you're in? I was very impressed with that. Refocused my mind about that subject.
I worked for the Department of Labor. I have a work background, how to make good jobs better jobs, or how to make jobs better. And it's fascinating to see, but not at all surprising at the same time when you see what's happening in the US today, that what people care about is creating better jobs, and the economic situation and insecurities that so many people are facing around the kitchen table. And that's what we're getting at, which is a really exciting moment to be working on this very critical issue. And so I do believe that the next generation of business leaders too are standing up right now and saying, I will only be a business leader if I'm doing well by all of the stakeholders, my workers, consumers, communities that I am representing. And I think that that's the moment that we're in.
Martin Whitaker is the CEO of Just Capital.
Well, the marketplace isn't working for a lot of people. People feel as though they're disconnected or disenfranchised. And I believe that the best way to drive real solutions, lasting prosperity for the greatest number of people is through markets. And that we have to connect that back to this idea of justness. If markets don't work for the population, then we got a big problem. Well, first of all, we can provide the market with the information that it needs to channel capital in a more just direction. Right now, there's just not enough information on which companies even pay their people a living wage, who provides great benefits, who treats their workers with the most respect. So markets work best when they have good information. That's Just Capital's job. We provide data to investors, to consumers, and to the companies themselves on wages, on how they can support communities, how they can provide better environmental impacts. And we think that ultimately is going to have a system change, a system effect to drive capital in a more just direction. What that will do is create a race to the top. Companies will start to pay their people more, and they will be rewarded in the marketplace for doing that. The major difference between Just Capital's approach and anybody else in the market is that it's not what we think is important. We draw our direction from the public. Our polling and our survey work tells us what the public cares about. And that's crucial because the public is the market. So we're really trying to reflect back to people the things that they've told us are important.
Just Capital now has the most authoritative, unbiased source of data about how corporations perform on the things people in the U.S. care about most. One of the biggest surprises for me was the fact that the more just the company, the steadier the stock. Companies on the Just 100 list carry significantly lower investment risk. They offer a higher return on an invested capital and lower volatility in earnings per share and stock price. The past few years have seen the rise of something called socially responsible capitalism. The central idea is that every business has many different participants: employees, customers, the community in which it operates, its effect on the society, and of course, shareholders. The company should take into account the interests of each of these groups. These are the companies on the Just Capital list. By keeping up on the reports from Just Capital, consumers, business leaders, investors, and virtually everyone can decide where to buy things, where to work, and where to invest. The most powerful tool you have to get what you want is not your vote, it's your wallet. And Just Capital can help you decide how to use it.